I'm Tara Hounsley, Director of Communications and host of Grow Your UK Fashion and Textile Business with the UKFT. This podcast is your inside track to the people, support and insights shaping the future of UK fashion and textiles. In each episode, I speak to experts from the UKFT team to break down what matters most to your business, from compliance and international trade to manufacturing, sustainability and skills. Whether you're a designer, manufacturer, brand or supplier, you'll hear real advice, success stories and practical guidance to help you grow. Subscribe now to Grow Your UK Fashion and Textile Business with the UKFT on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Welcome to Grow Your UK Fashion and Textile Business with UKFT. Today's episode is all about UKFT's role as the voice of the UK fashion and textile industry. So that's how we represent your interests at the highest level, influence policy and keep your business one step ahead. I'm joined by Adam Mansell, CEO, who leads our policy and government engagement work. Adam has a wealth of experience in the UK fashion and textile industry, and we'll be discussing how UKFT works with UK government, international trade bodies and global organisations to shape the best environment for our industry. Hi, Adam.
Hi.
So, firstly, why is it so important for UK fashion and textile businesses to have a unified voice?
This is an enormous industry. It contributes about £62 billion a year to the UK economy. It employs 1.3 million people and generates £23 billion in tax take. It's a very diverse and broad industry, and it's extremely important that we talk to government about creating the best business environment for this industry.
Thank you. What difference does it make to have UKFT representing the sector with government, industry groups and beyond?
We have a very big voice. We have a lot to say. I spend a lot of time talking to a huge range of different government departments and agencies, from the Home Office to the Low Pay Commission to the Department of Environment. I could be talking about water quality and energy one day. We could be talking about trade policy the next. We have a very broad and diverse range of members, everyone from high-end fashion to people who make parts for nuclear submarines out of textiles. All of those parts of the industry need to have their voices heard when decisions are being made around what happens to this country and elsewhere.
And are those generally big businesses? Are they small businesses? How does that work?
It's a very good question. Our membership covers a vast array of businesses, both in terms of the product that they make, but in terms of their size as well. So we have a lot of the high street retail in our membership, but we also have very small two-person people in our membership as well. So it, particularly for the smaller and the SME type businesses, having a conduit to government, having a voice to government through UKFT is incredibly important. Obviously, for some of the big players, they have their own infrastructure that allows them to talk to government. However, even for those big players, having an organisation like UKFT talk on their behalf, being able to say things that they possibly can't say themselves to government is extremely important.
They might be listed, they might have shareholders, I suppose.
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of the government departments and international partners or working groups that we're regularly involved in?
Certainly. I mean, probably our closest department in the UK is the Department for Business and Trade. And there we talk to them around a whole array of subjects, including trade policy and export support. But we also speak to the Department of Environment, and there we could be talking around the possibility for extended producer responsibility legislation. We could be talking to the Environment Agency, which is one of the arm's length bodies that DEFRA look after, and there we could be talking around the climate change levy, the need to have better monitoring for water quality in the UK, or we could be talking to the American Apparel and Footwear Association around, for instance, the impact that the Trump tariffs are having and what lobbying that industry association are doing on behalf of the global trade into the US. We also are very heavily involved with Eurotex, which is the European equivalent of UKFT. And there we will be talking in a wide range of working groups, everything from compliance to international trade to energy security. So there's a whole host of organisations that we talk to on a daily basis.
And how do members sort of access some of this ability to talk to government? How would they go about that within UKFT?
by talking to us, by responding to our surveys, by attending our events, but particularly our briefing events. We do a lot of information sharing around upcoming legislation. And that not only gives us the opportunity to brief industry about what we think the challenges are going to be, but it also allows industry to feed back to us, that then allows us to take that view and those concerns and those challenges to government. So it's around that interaction with everything that UKFT does. It's around the dialogue between members and us as an organisation. And it's also around us bringing together the various voices. There are lots of government consultations, for instance, and quite often we will go out to industry, go out to our members and ask them the questions that government want answered, and we will then consolidate those answers and present them to government on behalf of the industry.
And there's some real common, again, we've got a really diverse membership, but there's some real common issues, common challenges where we can come together on certain things and have a stronger voice. How do you think, is our industry, does it have the recognition it needs from government at the moment?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think in all of the years that I've been working in the industry, we've never been listened to as much by government as we are currently. We as UKFT have never been more involved in working groups with government, in briefings to ministers and senior civil servants. However, I think it's realistic to say that it's a challenging time across all industries at the moment. And government finds itself in a very difficult situation financially. So whilst we're being listened to and whilst we are consulted with on a wide range of topics, we are not, unfortunately, at the top of the government's priority list, and we should be, because our industry provides the enabling technology for virtually every other industry you can think of, from pharmaceuticals to elite sports, from automotive to aerospace. Textiles is everywhere, and we're an extremely important industry for the UK.
And fashion, the fashion industry, that sort of soft power, internationally, our global reputation, again, reinforcing that is really important and a big bit of what we do, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a huge part of what we do. We have the most amazing heritage brands. We have the most amazing creative catwalk designers. And to be able to use that soft power, as you say, that creativity, that heritage story is extremely important in the way that the UK can present itself internationally.
And what are some of the key hot topics that we're working on? What are our kind of key priorities at the moment?
There's a whole host. International business is always top of our list, and that splits into two parts. One is around trade policy. So we have been heavily involved in briefing the government and working with the government on a whole host of trade agreements recently, including, for instance, the India Free Trade Agreement, where we have secured some pretty good rules of origin for our industry.
And that's about making it work for our, we'll speak to the companies that are relevant. That's about making it work in the best way possible for our industry, isn't
exactly.
it, really? And getting that voice on the,
Getting our voice at the table, making sure the government understand the implications of what they're asking for, and ideally getting government to ask for what we as an industry need. And in those situations, particularly free trade agreements, you've got competing needs from the sourcing part of the industry and the UK manufacturing part of the industry. However, it's our role to represent both those needs in things like free trade agreements, and making sure that the rules of origin work for both sides of that supply chain is extremely important, and something that I'm quite proud of what we do and how we're able to straddle both needs. And
it's a lot of behind the scenes
work.
There's
a lot of behind the scenes work. And things like the India Free Trade Deal, discussions around the South Korean Free Trade Deal, those discussions have been going on month after month, year after year. So we do this a lot. So back to your question, international trade. So there's the trade policy side, but there's also the export promotion side, where we work closely with the Department of Business and Trade to help promote, as we talked about earlier, that not only the soft power of the industry, but also help companies export directly. In the past, we used to work with the government and had something called the Trade Access Programme, which gave direct grant funding to businesses to help them access shows throughout the world. Now, very unfortunately, that has fallen by the wayside. It's one of the victims of the government spending review. And it's extremely unfortunate because all of our European and close competitors, Italy, France, Turkey, get significant support from their governments. I mean, quite a lot of support in quite a lot of areas, be it travel or stand costs or all the rest of it, and our industry gets nothing. So we lobby very hard to try and make sure that that message around the fact that the playing field is not level, that we're competing with both hands and both legs tied behind our backs, doesn't quite work, but you know what I mean, is something we push for a lot. So that's a key ask for us. On the sustainability front, the need for the UK to introduce its own extended producer responsibility legislation for textiles specifically is one of our major asks. Extended producer responsibility, in essence, makes the organisation that puts a garment or a textile on the market responsible for it at the end of life. The reason that it's significantly important is that we have an EPR system, is that we need an EPR system that rewards the good and punishes the bad. So if you, for instance, put sustainable products on the market, then your EPR fee should be lower than if you just put non-sustainable products on the market. But fundamental to our ask around EPR is two things: an eco-modulated EPR, which would reward the good and penalise the bad, but most importantly of all, that any funds raised through an EPR scheme are kept within the industry and are used to drive circularity within the industry. We've done a lot of work recently around looking at textile recycling infrastructure, for instance, through some of our very large projects such as the ACT programme and the SIFIN programme. And to drive circularity, to drive recycling, we need that infrastructure. And currently it doesn't exist in the UK, and it doesn't actually exist in any meaningful sense anywhere really in Europe. But an EPR scheme could raise significant amounts of money, and that could allow us to de-risk the investment we need to drive textile circularity.
An EPR is something that is happening, is a reality in other countries.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at those, seeing what works, seeing how it's gonna work.
Exactly. So there are EPR systems, for instance, in France for fashion and textiles, which is working and which is raising some money. However, it's quite cumbersome, it's administratively burdensome, and we're trying to make sure that the scheme that the UK government might adopt isn't that.
Because we know this is going to come. So it's how does it work best for our industry, and how does it raise the funds to go where we want it to go?
Exactly.
To make the most impact,
exactly that.
To make the UK competitive in all of these areas.
Absolutely. And for things like EPR, there is a French system, there's a Dutch system coming on stream, there is an EU-wide scheme that will be, is in development. And all of our members who sell to the EU or to places like California who are looking at having their own EPR scheme, one of the roles that we have as that voice of the industry is trying to make sure that where possible, there is interconnectivity between those various global schemes. And for EPR in particular, what we're looking at is there a way of making sure that the data ingestion for all of the different EPR schemes is the same? So we work very closely with colleagues to test data systems to see whether they can be the same for the UK as they are for France, as they are for California, for instance. So it's quite granular, some of the stuff that we do in terms of our lobbying and voice of the industry
again,
stuff.
that's going to have a really big financial impact on companies.
Huge.
And making sure we get that right is really important.
Fundamental. And it's not just about the here and now. Whilst lobbying for grant support is really important, lobbying to make sure that systems work in the future is probably even more important, because it gives companies the time to make sure that they have the appropriate data, that their systems capture the appropriate data, gives companies the time to make sure that they are working to what is coming down the track, rather than having to constantly be on the back foot and coming up with new ways of working.
Similar but related, talk to me a bit about the skills agenda and our place in that. And again, this is all about sort of maintaining the sustainable future, sustainable in its broadest sense, of our industry, isn't it? And how it works best for all the players.
Absolutely.
The whole supply chain.
Again, we have probably two roles within the skills environment. So we're the government appointed sector skills bodies, and actually we're appointed by all regional governments as well as by the Westminster government to be that sector skills body. And that, in essence, means that we're responsible for maintaining the quality of vocational qualifications across the UK. At the same time, we have a very strong role in making sure that we represent the industry to make sure that the training that's available in the industry, be that vocational, be that private training providers, or be that universities, is appropriate for the sector. And one of our wins very recently has in the apprenticeship world, where we co-wrote all of the 14 apprenticeships for the industry, was that we have managed to get the funding available for industry, for apprenticeships, doubled in many cases. So we've made it significantly easier and better for the industry to access those qualifications. But we also look to the future. So one of the things we've been doing very recently is looking at the National Occupational Standards Suite, which basically underpin all of the education system. And we've made sure that the NOS suite now contains the sustainability information needed to make sure that the jobs of the future, for instance, in that national textile recycling infrastructure that we were talking about earlier, are there already. So we do a lot of work, as I've said previously, to make sure that the future works for our sector.
You talked just then about wins. Can you talk to me a bit about other examples where UKFT's advocacy has led to real change or protection for businesses?
One of the big wins we've had recently is around the climate change levy. Now, climate change levy, in essence, is a tax rebate for textile manufacturers who, in return for getting a significant rebate, sign up to energy reduction targets. The original scheme came to an end, and UKFT, together with several other manufacturing industry organisations, lobbied very hard for the implementation of a new scheme, and that's now come on board. And to put that very simply, the scheme is worth something like £6 million a year just to the textile manufacturing industry in the UK, and that's just in terms of reduction in tax payable. If you then factor into account the energy savings that the industry will achieve by meeting its targets, those savings are significantly broader. So that's a real win for us. International trade, I've already talked about the rules of origin in several of the FTAs.
Free trade agreements.
Free trade agreements. We do all talk in acronyms. One of the other significant wins for us very recently, going back to making sure that we're representing all sides of the industry, is there's something called the DCTS, the Developing Countries Trading Scheme, which in essence is around giving least developed countries better access to the UK market. What we have managed to achieve there is a significantly reduced tariff situation, which will allow some of our big retail members, our big sourcing members, to carry on sourcing from some of those least developed countries, which allows those least developing countries, LDCs, to grow their industry, to grow employment, to grow their own economies.
Do you want to talk to me a bit about our links in Europe and the US as well? Or much broader, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've touched briefly on our work with Eurotex, which is the European Apparel and Textile Organisation. That's a very large organisation in terms of who it represents. It's obviously the whole of the EU plus the UK plus Turkey. That has a significant role in terms of lobbying the European Commission. And for us, whilst we have left the EU, which is a significantly damaging move for our industry, it does allow us to ensure that we know what's happening in Europe, we know what legislation's coming down the track, and there is a huge amount of legislation that's going to impact our sector coming down the track. And even though we have left the EU is by far our largest export market. It accounts for something like 70% of all of our exports. So most of our members, most of the industry are having to meet that legislation, even though we don't get to have a say about what that legislation is anymore. So it's extremely important that we're involved in Eurotex, that we understand the intricacies of very simple sounding things like the new labelling regulations that are coming out. What does that mean for our industry? How do they have to change what is on the care labels? Do they have to have recycled content information? All that sort of information is extremely important. But then we also push quite hard to make sure that we get the best possible access to the EU. And our European counterparts in Eurotex have exactly the same needs as we do. So they echo what we're trying to say. So making sure that we're around that table is extremely important. I've talked again about our relationship with the American Apparel and Footwear Association, who are a very large organisation in the US, who represent, very similarly to UKFT, the needs of their industry to government. But again, we meet with them on a monthly basis to share information, to look at what's coming down the track, to inform each other about different policy changes, different tariff challenges, different challenges around sustainability, different challenges around supply chain stretches, logistics problems, all those sorts of things. So we do a huge amount to share information, share best practice, understand what's going on a global stage, so that we can help grow our members' businesses.
This all is, I mean, it's obviously really important and it's brilliant. It's a lot of the things we're doing are a sort of big picture for the future. I guess for members right now, again, these are my challenges, these are my things that I'm worried about. How do they come to us with their issues, really? And on a practical basis, I suppose the other thing is, I guess a key part of our role is being able to say, this is a big thing that you should be thinking. It's sort of interpreting the things that are coming down the track.
Yeah. There's two parts to your question there, really. So I'll do the last one first. So quite often I describe our role in legislation as being a translator. So we take 150 pages of legislation and tell the industry that actually what they need to do is items 1 to 10, and this is the order that they need to do it in. And quite often, more importantly, what we do is tell them what they don't need to do. There is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of challenges out there. There's a lot of people trying to sell software solutions, for instance, around digital product passports, where actually what the industry needs to do is not what they might be being told by service providers. So that translation bit, that honing in on the detail bit and telling people what they do and don't need to do is very important. In terms of how we take information from the industry, how the industry present challenges to us, part of it's about us being out and about. It's fantastic to see the team out and about, meeting members on a regular basis. We get a huge interaction with our members. I mean, we were looking at the numbers of members that come to our seminars and webinars and conferences. I think something like 3,500 people came to our events in 2024 alone. That gives us the opportunity to ask questions, for people to present their challenges to us. For instance, one of the areas where we're pushing very hard is around the reinstatement of VAT-free shopping. And so when we go out and talk to some of our heritage manufacturing brands who, for instance, who sell high-end product, or some of our manufacturers who supply into very high-end brands who in turn their sales are suffering because of the lack of VAT-free shopping, it allows them to give us really detailed information about how their production has dropped on the back of the lack of VAT-free shopping, things like that. So it's that interaction with the industry that allows us to take that knowledge and for the industry to share their challenges with us.
And like you say, it's about being out and about in the industry. It's about going to events. We're talking to people all the time. Come and say hello, send us an email. All of that, isn't it?
And, that happens in so many different ways. So, we talked earlier about our trade promotion activity. So, in normal times, we will go to 20, 30, 40 trade shows a year. We might take some, north of sort of 600-700 companies to those trade shows. There'll be visitors at those trade shows. We'll interact with all of those people. There'll be conversations. Now, some of those might take place in a pub or a bar, but that's a good way of getting information, of sharing knowledge. But it's a very important way that UKFT can take the temperature of the industry, can figure out where the challenges are happening across all parts of the industry. So it's really important, that dialogue, that interaction with members.
And we have members of the of government at our events as well. It's bringing it both ways, isn't it?
Yeah, so we work quite hard to make sure that not only do we interact with government on an official basis, but also, this isn't quite the right term, but an unofficial basis as well. So we will invite civil servants to some of our functions, to some of our conferences. We quite often have consul generals, for instance, coming to our trade stands at international events. And that's a really good opportunity for government officials to interact directly with members and the industry and to hear from them what their immediate challenges are.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Grow Your UK Fashion and Textile Business with UKFT. At UKFT, we're proud to represent the UK fashion and textile industry, championing your interests with government, trade partners and global regulators. If you'd like to be part of the conversation and make sure your business stays informed and prepared, visit ukft.org to explore our policy work or learn more about membership. And listen to future episodes and follow us on LinkedIn to stay connected. Until next time.